Hey, Taj, nice to see you again. Um, I know you're spending time with your family, but in the midst of all of that, the situation in the region, in the Middle East, is sort of explosive to say the least. We had talked previously about Israel going into Lebanon, and then after that, Iran, launched, almost 200 rockets, missiles at Israel, and Israel has now pledged publicly that it will retaliate. And the only question is, what form will that retaliation take? Obviously, the United States is very concerned, and President Joe Biden has said publicly that he does not want Israel to hit Iran's nuclear facilities because that would definitely, result in a regional war. But then he also raised the possibility of Israel hitting Iran's petroleum places as well as ports. So it's a very tenuous situation right now. So much so that, as we had talked the last time, there is concern throughout the region, even in Turkey. And as you noted, the Turkish people are, naturally concerned about what will happen if there is a greater regional war. Is there still a level of concern that you're finding as you talk to family and friends?
Yes, definitely. I mean, in Turkey, people are really concerned and everybody's watching very closely what's happening in Israel. Anything that happens in this region affects everybody. Especially Turkey is in such a geopolitically important spot. We're right in the middle of Europe and the Middle East. And I mean, we are actually 20 hours or so away from Ukraine, from
Right.
Istanbul. You know, we are about 20 hours away from Israel. We're about 20 hours away from like the Iranian border. So wherever anything happens, that affects us. Actually, throughout that whole Ukrainian-Russian war, Turkey got so many Ukrainian refugees. And then when Syria had things going on, we had, incredible number of Syrian refugees into Turkey. And of course,
Um,
in general, everybody's concerned about what's going on in Gaza and uh,
sure. And
Palestine.
and the
Palestine.
refugee crisis is becoming to be real because not only are the refugees, thousands upon thousands in Gaza, but now because of Israel's incursion into Lebanon, there's an estimate that at least 1 million people are going to be displaced
Mhm.
and are going to have to be looking for places to take shelter. And so that there is a humanitarian crisis that could well affect countries like Turkey, right?
Yes. So I was watching when they first entered Lebanon. I was
Yeah.
watching it on Turkish TV, and they were talking about how it's like a, big complex with six different apartment buildings.
Hmm.
And apparently, there are four stories below ground as well, below
Right.
each of those apartment buildings. And it's kind of similar to what they have here because there's not a lot of space for parking cars, so they usually make like several floors down for parking decks, so that people can,
Underground parking.
yeah, so they had some intelligence that the leader of Hezbollah was having a meeting underground in one of those, like under these apartment buildings, one of them. And there are six of them, like six buildings. And there are people who live there, like it's families, children, and they just bought the whole thing, all six of them, just so they can kill this one guy. And in the process, God knows how many people died. And they didn't send a warning or anything because they wanted to catch this guy. So they're like, okay, well, this guy is under the ground somewhere over in here. So let's just kill everybody here so that this guy's dead. I mean, there's no regard for human life. In the US media, I'm watching those, and they talk about how precise the attacks are
Right.
by
Yes. Yeah.
Israel, how they are targeted, and they're trying to minimize.
It's always considered collateral damage.
Yeah, but this is beyond collateral damage. I mean, these people are not even in your own country. They're not attacking you.
So, what's the public sentiment right now in Turkey? Do
I
you
mean, the
think?
public is absolutely furious about this whole war. Like they were furious about Gaza. And then, of course, the whole West Bank. Now Israel is moving on to Lebanon, and people don't believe that it's a limited operation or anything because they've seen it time and time, like Israel lies about these things. And they know that Israel wants a piece of land in Lebanon, and they're going to invade that area and turn that into Gaza. And of course, these bombs are, I mean, the Turkish TV was talking about these are F-15s, F-16s. They're all coming from the US. These are all US bombs. And when they hit those 6 buildings, like it went all the way to the ground and created
Right.
like a deep crater.
Well, what is the attitude or the feeling towards America today in Turkey? How would you describe it?
Well, Turkish people generally liked Americans, but they also always had like this distrust. But now it is much stronger, the distrust, because what they think is that Israel is a tiny little country, in the middle of the Middle East. It's not a big country. It doesn't have the power to do what he's doing without the support of the US. So they think Israel is nothing if US doesn't support them. Israel would never be able to do any of this and if the US wasn't
Right.
sending them weapons, sending them bombs, sending them military support. So for Turkish people, and I'm sure in general in the Middle East, US is completely complicit in whatever atrocities are happening. And I mean that's terrible. Like that's how people look at it. And like I said to you, they had these traffic lights. I was really
Yeah.
surprised to see them. And they have, like, it says Israel the murderer on all of the red lights.
Yeah, well, you'll be able to show it to us, right?
Yeah.
The Turkish people buy this argument from the U.S. and even Britain and Germany and France that Israel has a right to defend itself, and therefore, when it is attacked, Israel and its allies, have a right to retaliate. I mean, does that argument work at all in Turkey?
No, it's the whole perspective that is wrong. So when I keep hearing the same question, doesn't Israel have a right to defend itself? Do you believe Israel has a right to defend itself? Like this question keeps coming. Every time I watch an argument in the US media, they always talk about Israel has a right to defend itself. What about Palestinians? Do Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? What about Lebanon? Does Lebanon have a right to defend itself? People need to have some perspective to what is happening so that they don't ask this stupid question. Like, this is a stupid question. Of course, if somebody attacks Israel, they do have a right to defend themselves. But the situation is not like that. I think of it like this. I mean, imagine Mexico is telling, like, at the Mexican border with San Diego, the Mexican government tells all the people who live in San Diego, look, you guys all live in the vicinity of some, I don't know, LA gangs who
Hmm.
are threatening our security. So we have a right to defend ourselves. So we're going to bomb all of that area. So we're going to give you 1 hour to evacuate your homes and we're going to attack. I mean, what would you do? What would the people in San Diego do? Just quietly leave their homes, just pick up their suitcases or backpacks and just get out on the streets and wait for Mexico to bomb? And then nobody does anything. The US Army doesn't go in and respond to that. No, like this is what people expect. They think that Israel can do this. This is exactly what happened, by the way, in Lebanon. They told people to
Right.
evacuate their homes. They gave them 1 hour and they attacked at the end of that hour. We were watching it live on TV because, all the Turkish TV channels, news channels were giving that as breaking news. Imagine it that way. If this was Mexico saying that to you and you live in San Diego, I mean, does Mexico have a right to defend itself in that situation? I don't think so. Like, I mean, in this situation, only San Diego has a right to defend itself because this is stupid. Like, it's absurd. It doesn't make any sense. I think, this is another issue with the US. When you criticize a country, they think that you're criticizing everybody who live there. Nobody has anything against, like, Israeli citizens or Jews in general, you
Right.
know. But of course, like there are a lot of ignorant people who equate some of the things that Israel does with, Jewish, but that's not the majority. I was actually looking at some of the newspapers today, and I mean, I'll show you one. They had this is one of the major newspapers, so they had a picture of Netanyahu and Khamenei, and it talks about what an Israeli-Iranian war would look like.
Oh,
And they had some expert opinions. A lot of the experts thought that because Iran doesn't have a border with Israel and they are 1,500 kilometers away from each other, it would probably be through the air. That is what it says: sabotage, assassinations, and missiles.
okay.
And they think that's what it's going to be like, but they also think that Iran can't do a whole lot because they don't have a very strong air force. So this will probably paralyze Iran.
But first, Netanyahu said it would be Israel would have absolutely no problem launching, missiles that could hit Tehran. And then when Ayatollah Khamenei spoke, he said Iran could easily hit Tel Aviv. So they're already setting out saying, yeah, if this turns out into a broader, great bring of war, you
Mhm.
know, major population centers will be targeted. Um,
I don't know about that because I mean Iran already threw like 200 missiles, and I mean they weren't effective, right?
Yeah, but he said he basically in the I don't know if you call it a prayer or the address, he said it
Mhm.
was a limited response, and Iran has the capability to do much more than it did, and he said there will be more to come, and then warned Israel if Israel does what it says it's going to do, then it's all bets are off. So and then of course they've got all of these proxies. They've got Hezbollah in Lebanon that has hundreds upon hundreds of missiles. Yeah, you've got Hamas, you've got and then you've got the Houthi. So it's not just Iran that's going to be involved in this thing. But my question is, how concerned, from your reading of the media, of the press, and of newspapers and on television, how concerned are the people in Turkey of this greater regional war breaking out?
One thing that the Turkish president said today was that he said Israel is trying to spread the fire into the entire region. So, from a very objective perspective, it looks like Israel is the one who really, really wants to start a war. And everybody's reluctant, but they are being forced to get involved.
Yeah.
So, that is kind of the picture that I'm seeing, and
Here,
that's what
here's
everybody else is seeing.
Here's what the Ayatollah also said, which was interesting. He said, quote, today we must fasten the belt of defense and pursuit of independence from Afghanistan to Yemen and from Iran to Gaza and Lebanon and across all Islamic countries. The Islamic Republic, that's Iran, will do whatever is necessary in this regard with strength and decisiveness. In fulfilling this duty, we will neither delay nor act hastily. It's those are fighting words, right? I mean, they're not words of conciliation. They're not words of peace. They're not words of saying,
No, but
fine.
remember, he is also addressing Muslims in a Friday prayer. He is doing the
Yes,
Friday sermon.
yeah,
So this is a day, it's like the Christian Sunday where everybody's in the church. These people are all in the mosque and they're listening to him. And like you mentioned, I mean, he doesn't do the sermon very often. So this is the first time he's doing it in 5 years. So he's trying to tell his own people that we're not going to just sit still when they're
yeah.
attacking us or assassinating people in our land. So, but also trying to give a message to everybody else. But honestly, I still don't think Iran is that strong, like Air Force wise. I'm not sure. I mean, they've been suffering all these years from sanctions. So I do agree that, this will probably paralyze Iran and not do much to Israel.
I Yeah, but understand this too, that in a lot of the Muslim countries, they sort of bombings and sort of assassinations and all of that is also part of the also part of the way they deal with Israel. So, it's not surprising you're going to be seeing a lot more, bombings in cities around Israel. Um, so that's another concern Israel has to have is that, you can lob all the missiles you want at Iran, but in the end, what's to stop, some guy wrapped around with bombs walking into a marketplace in Tel Aviv? You
No,
know,
I mean, this is one big concern, and I've been hearing, there are a lot of panels on Turkish news channels, and they are always discussing this. But, this is actually what Netanyahu is doing is really threatening the security of Israelis. Everything that he's doing is just making everything worse for his own citizens. But I mean, we have seen that he doesn't really care about his own citizens, even though it's not perpetrated that way in the American media. But here, I mean, everybody believes that, he was the one who just bombed indiscriminately, knowing that there were some Israeli hostages there. And I mean, it's a known fact here. So everybody knows that, he did more damage to Israelis than anybody else. And I think if you look at Lebanon, I mean, they don't have an army. They
right,
don't have a very powerful state. Hezbollah is it. Like
right,
Hezbollah is the one who provides police and security in that place. And I mean, US is the country of the Second Amendment, right? So this is where it says like if your country is oppressing or if there's like this kind of situation, then you can formulate a well-regulated militia, right? And that's what is happening in a lot of those countries. Like if you think about Gaza, if you think about Lebanon, like these are places where they don't have a strong army, so people are taking up arms. Like this is the US mentality, right?
So what is the relationship, Turkey's relationship with Israel and with Iran?
Turkey has always had a good relationship with Israel. We have always had trade with Israel. And historically, Turkey is known to have accepted a lot of, Jewish people from other places where they have been persecuted. So Turkey historically had a Jewish population as well because of, people coming as refugees. Like there were Ottoman sultans who accepted Jewish people who were persecuted by Christians in Hungary and in other parts of I guess where Europe is right now. I heard Erdogan mention that they were going to stop trade with Israel, but he does say that, and they still keep going. So he says that for Turkish people, just to
Right.
please them. But I'm not sure. But I think the last one he said he did stop certain trade with Israel. With Iran, as I mentioned, when I was growing up as in Turkey, we had a very secular government, and Iran was always like what they tried to put fear on us about. It was like we don't want to be like Iran. That's why we have to be secular, which I
Right,
believe. Like I believe in secularism of a state. Not people. People don't become secular. I mean, you
right.
can be religious, but government should not have anything to do with religion.
So,
Uh,
do you get a sense from talking to your family members, talking to friends, other people, that Turkey believes that the region, the Middle East, would be in better shape if, for example, Kamala Harris were elected president, as opposed to Donald Trump, who basically has basically said that
no,
Israel has a right to do whatever the hell it wants to do.
no. The answer is no, because they are right now they blame everything on Biden administration. I mean, they think this is the Biden administration who is allowing all this. They think it's the Biden administration who is supporting the war. And
So they think things will be better under Trump.
I mean, they don't trust Trump either. It's just they don't think any of these candidates will change
Okay.
anything. They don't think that Trump is going to be any better, but maybe they're just
So,
pure.
rather than who's president, it almost comes down to the politics of America, which is very pro-Israel, and both in administration and Congress, and so there seems to be, and what you're saying is there seems to be an attitude that as long as as long as there is so strong political support for
Mhm.
Israel in America, nothing's going to change, right?
Yeah, this is exactly how people believe here.
But in the end, is there a sense in public when you're on the streets, when you're talking to people, when you're in the restaurants and all of that, is there a sense of doom and gloom? Or are people just going on with their lives and sort of have this attitude?
Well, there is a doom and gloom, but it's not about Israel. In Turkey, like, there is this idea that Turkey is just going backwards because of, what's happening in the government. There's a lot of corruption. People are upset about the inflation and the economy. And so, they talk more about that. But there are also people who are concerned that this whole war is going to spread and like get too close to us and will start affecting us because nobody wants to be involved in a war in Turkey. Um, but I mean, people continue their lives. I mean, there's no like disruption of life. I mean, I went to watch my sister-in-law and her sister sing, in the
Sad,
corner, like
singing sad love songs, right?
singing love songs. I mean, they're not all sad. Well, they're mostly sad. Um, but no, like life is going on. People are doing their work. Even the US elections are not really too much. They do mention it sometimes and talk about it, but I heard some of my dad's friends talk about what's happening in Israel, and everybody blames Biden for everything that's happening right now. And they think US and Israel are partners in this. So, so that's kind of how it is at the moment. You also need to understand that we are watching on the news like the death toll in Gaza and what
Yeah.
has been happening. And I was just like trying to get a perspective on like how many people have died just in, like just the Palestinians. I mean, it's almost like as many as the entire population of Mahoning County. Like,
Mhm.
this is how many people are wiped out. And so people believe it's a genocide. And some newspapers even mention Israel as a terrorist state, like it's a terrorist state, So, like they have completely wiped out like Poland, Boardman, Canfield, Austintown kind of thing. Like that's how the death toll is. And then, of course, in Lebanon, it has also increased to, um, what I think it's like 1600 or 1900. So, that is something that people are very upset about, and they do talk about it all the time among each other.
Right now, do you believe that there is sentiment in Turkey that there is going to be a war between Israel and Iran, but nobody seems to know what shape that would take? Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the discussion is like, yeah, they do believe there will probably be a war in, between Iran and Israel right now, like at this point. I mean, that was probably not something anybody talked about maybe a week ago, but since Israel
Right.
entered Lebanon, this talk started.
Okay. We'll talk again, of course. Next week we'll have another podcast relating to U.S. politics. Um, we've done the analysis of the vice presidential debate, and we'll continue this until, of course, you're going to take a little break this weekend, right? Is that what you're going to do this weekend? You're going to get some R&R on the beach. Is that
Oh,
what
not
you're?
this weekend. I'm leaving on Thursday for that one. All
Take
right.
care. Thank you.